Thanks everyone for joining us for our bi-weekly AMA. My name is Steven. I'm the co-founder of Taraxa, and today with us on the AMA are two special guests. We have Matt Lockyer from NEAR, and also Justin Snap, my co-founder at Taraxa. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hey, I'm Matt Lockyer, and I'm basically leading the engineering team of the developer relations team at Near Protocol. Soon to be kind of shuffled up a little bit. I can kind of speak to that a little bit later. But basically, Near, next gen blockchain smart contracts platform. And I joined Near over a year ago. Before that, I was in the crypto blockchain space since the beginning of 2017, where I sort of taught myself how to do Solidity and Ethereum smart contracts. Was pretty interested in the Ethereum ecosystem and community, and made a lot of friends in the space, attended a lot of the hackathons, including the first ETH Waterloo hackathon and a bunch of other ETH Global and ETH Denver, separate things, hackathons. So made a lot of friends in the space and had a lot of fun. Wrote a bunch of stuff about NFTs and non-financial use cases of crypto. It's all financial use cases, but kind of non-high finance use cases of crypto. So yeah, I'm really interested to be here, and thanks for inviting me, Stephen, Justin.
Great. Justin, you want to say something about yourself too for people who
yeah, so people that are regular attenders will have seen me before, but I'm the CTO here at Taraxa, and often I'm off busy working on the code with the engineers. And Steve and I go way back to college is originally how we met, and we've been working on Taraxa now for quite a while. Great progress.
We're having a little bit of trouble hearing you, Justin.
Really? It's all about how I hold my laptop. So let me try holding it better. I have a much better computer to be sitting in front of for meetings, but it's piled up with baby junk since we're getting ready for the new one that's coming. But anyway.
Okay, great. Well, hey, we're very happy today to have Matt with us. I guess the big topic that we actually want to talk about, like Matt mentioned in his introduction, is how do we leverage blockchain technology in non-financial applications? So Matt, do you want to quickly talk about that? And not quickly, but you want to talk about what your thoughts are and what Near Protocol's approach is towards enabling non-financial applications with blockchain technology?
Yeah. So Near blockchain is just another kind of L1, but it has some interesting features that make it pretty useful for building apps, and I mean apps as in not just sort of DeFi or kind of financial speculation kind of things. It's designed to be async, which should be familiar to a lot of app developers, and it has a human readable kind of account system. So basically I can send Near tokens to, StephenP.Near, and I know it's you. So that's super helpful. And we also have access keys, which is basically kind of a departure from sort of a one key, one account model. So you can have many keys on an account. In fact, you can call a smart contract, and then you can get a key added to your account, or added to another account where you provide the public key, and then that contract adds a key to its account, and then you get to call contract methods of that account. So there's lots of flexibility you can do when you have one account and many keys, and especially because the keys can be scoped to only calling particular methods inside a smart contract. So when you take all of these features together, you kind of have a blockchain that basically can be used with high speed, high throughput, scalability, blah, 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 but also on top of that, human readable names, async environment, and these keys where you can sort of manage access control into smart contracts.
Okay.
But that kind of spells, apps. to me, it spells apps,
Okay. So that, that sounded like how Near's layer one technical infrastructure supports, I guess, applications in general. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I think, just to speak to that a little bit, I think in Taraxa, we're, we think about applications and layer one as really like a single stack, right? So I think when we were founded, we actually wanted to specifically solve this problem of informal transactions, tracking informal transactions, right? So, the most of the world's information and transactional data are informal, right? People are just talking to each other and say, "Hey, Matt, I'm gonna do X. You okay with it? Yeah, you're okay. Fine. Let's just get on with it, right?" So the vast majority of that kind of transactional agreement are not really recorded or verified. So the idea is that we really wanted to build a blockchain that was extremely high performance, specifically designed for tracking these informal transactions to build an audit trail, right? I think some of the unique features that we actually built in, just to name one example, is that we building a lot of concurrency into the protocol, so that actually these transactions can be actually not only included in the blockchain, but also executed in the blockchain out of order, actually, because a lot of these, not a lot of these, by definition, audit trails, right, for these informal transactions, these transactions are stateless, right? So you don't really need them to execute one by one. So so we also really, just like Near, right? We really believe that layer one is really there to obviously serve the applications. So there will be, I think, design choices and functionalities that you make at the layer one level in order to make sure that the applications run smoothly, right? Whatever types of applications you're actually trying to run. So. Hey, Matt, I think last time we talked, you mentioned that, Near was really, driving into or making a drive into applications such as, the gig economy, social tokens, or even, NFTs, right? Like you mentioned. Could you talk a little bit about those initiatives and, what kind of use cases you guys are seeing, or what kind of use cases you would like to see, right, being built on Near?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've seen from, I guess, let's kind of frame it as maybe the whole creator economy. There's a lot of people out there making everything from, big stars, musicians, celebrities, whatnot, all the way down to a yoga instructor, making videos on YouTube. So they're creating a lot of content, but they're currently kind of trapped in these Web 2 style platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, right? And even with musicians, Spotify, it's not really a happy revolution for all the musicians to go from record labels and selling physical media to to Spotify. Basically, it's just sort of it's kind of like having another master. So we kind of know this in the Web3 and sort of crypto blockchain space. We kind of are aware of this. We're interested in sort of peer-to-peer models and disintermediation. But I just want to kind of frame it there. Yeah, at Near, the company or sort of the foundation, the blockchain itself, the group that originally started it, was always interested in what they call the open web, and basically building sort of a new way to transact online, a new way to kind of create content and create value and create things that people want to participate in, that that was a little bit more kind of direct and less kind of siloed in these platforms. That has evolved like over time, organizationally within Near, but also it's evolved obviously outside of Near, and it's taken the form of, you know, DAOs and NFTs and social tokens to get access to like a Discord or a Telegram. So Discord and Telegram, you know, they have these features like where you can administer groups, but what we're doing is we're tying, you know, Web3 ownership as sort of a requirement to be added to these groups, or to maintain access to these groups. So we're kind of extending, you know, Web2 platforms, Web2 kind of experiences, these siloed kind of things that artists and creators use to engage with their communities. Not us personally, like at Near, but just in general, the whole crypto blockchain community is doing this already. And I think this trend is only going to continue. So we're going to basically use Web3 ownership as the substrate, and substrate, you know, just a fancy term for, you know, the foundation, right? So Web3 ownership, so I can own a unique collectible, I can own social tokens, I can have a balance of fan tokens, I can own some votes, the ability to vote on something now or in the future. We're going to take that substrate of just owning digital, like ownership in the digital context, and then we're gonna leverage that to add all sorts of magical experiences and interactions and things that people can do. And really, it's about empowering the creators to own their audience, to own their fans, to build a direct relationship, to get better information and better sort of fidelity of the relationship between them and their fans, between how their fans influence other fans, and things like that. So we're very passionate about that. And just to wrap up, kind of organizationally, how does this take shape within Near? There is a group of people that have sort of gravitated towards building, doing a little less developer relations and a little bit more building product inside of Near. And I'm sort of one member of that group, and we're you know, slowly working on a transition plan to basically become our own entity, which will basically just be producing, I don't know what you want to call it, but products that help creators do this. So that entity is called Satori, and I'm pretty excited to be a part of it. We have some really great people. We've already kind of started working on product, but we're just going to kind of continue the trend, and sort of kind of mark our independence from, I guess, you know, the Near Foundation as an organization, but not from the Near ecosystem. So we'll just be carrying on the build, but just as our own kind of operating entity, if that makes sense.
It's really cool. You guys are decentralizing from within.
That's right. Yeah. Well, we call it a spinout, but I don't know if everybody knows what a spinout is. I mean, you could look at like, so you see like, you know, the Avengers, and then you see like Black Widow. I guess that movie's coming out soon. So, you know, Black Widow's like a spinout movie, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I mean, you mentioned several things I think I really want to echo here. I think one of the things is that, I mean, the spin out, right? I mean, I think that to a large extent, we completely agree with that approach, because what we've seen with most layer one protocols that we're seeing in the market today is that they sort of just, you know, I mean, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that. They only focus on the technology. And then they try to incentivize developers to come into the ecosystem. And often that's a very difficult sell, right? It's a long and drawn out process. I think Near is taking a very proactive approach and say, hey, let's lead the way, right? Let's lead by example and create something so that not can only support the developers, but also, hey, let's build some prototypes to show people what's possible. I think at Taraxa, we've always taken a similar approach. Like I said before, we always saw the application. I think we're probably a little bit more sort of focused in building a specific type of application, but we always see it as like a single stack, right? Because it's sort of very difficult for developers to really conceive like, well, why should I build on your ecosystem, or why should I use your technology, until they see something, oh, this works on your technology, this is successful, or this is profitable, right? Built on your technology. So we're also building a set of applications really to sort of demonstrate that, hey, this is what we mean when we say tracking informal transactions, and this is why it works really well in the Taraxa ecosystem. I think you talked about another point I wanted to point out is that you talked about the enabling the the creator economy, the creator ecosystem, right? And disintermediating a lot of a lot of fan and creator contact, right? And just having directly contact with each other. For us, I think one of the products that we actually have been developing is this idea that, and it goes to a similar theme, right? Like how do you start to quantify influence, right? That's actually something that we're very interested in thinking about. Is that you have influencers, you have creators, and you have fans, but how do you quantify it, right? How do you quantify that influence? So what we're seeing in the market today is that there are maybe creators and influencers that are issuing their own assets, right? Issuing their own tokens. But it's not really still tethered to any sort of signal, right? It's sort of just free floating, and it's fine. It's fine if things are free floating, because the ecosystem can just make a decision on sort of what value do you tether it with. We were thinking about, hey, because we are built to track informal transactions, informal agreements, we are actually working on a system in which we can start to track, create an audit trail for someone's influence, right? Like what are they doing in the past, what done in the past, and what kind of impact they've had in the communities and ecosystems that they actually are active in. And that's sort of like, and this is all publicly available information, right? It's not like we're spying on someone. So we're trying to make sure all this is recorded and creating an audit trail, so that later on when someone issues an asset or I don't know, maybe wants to borrow against their sort of their influence, you have a quantified metric, right? And people can go to say, oh, this asset is worth like, Stephen coin is worth X because of these numbers, right? Or I'm going to give Stephen a better loan interest rate because on chain, right? Because of these numbers, right? So these are some of the things that sort of we're working towards, that's inside, I think, the cryptoverse. In addition to a lot of the other applications we've been working on in construction and supply chain, but we thought this one might be a lot closer into the crypto universe, and can get our community a much better understanding of what exactly informal transactions are and why is it important to track them, and why is it useful to actually keep track of them.
So I'm actually really curious about this. What would a practical example of tracking influence look like? Like deployed, I guess, in an application, or in maybe somehow kind of grafted onto an existing ecosystem. Like how would that kind of mix with Taraxa?
So I mean, we can use a simple example. So we always think about what kind of operational value we'll provide first, and then we figure out what kind of future asset token financial value. The problem that we run into, and I think a lot of project runs into, is how do you get the word out about something, right? It's especially hard, for established projects like Near Protocol. It might be a lot easier, but for new projects that are starting out, you're always figuring out, well, how do I get people to know about me, right? So you have sort of a very weird polarized choice, right? There are these big mega influencers that everyone knows, right? These people have like 2 million followers on Twitter or whatever. And you can go talk to them, right? They might not care about you, or they're going to charge you a ton of money. And they might mention you if you pay like an exorbitant amount of fees. And but because he's so big and he mentioned so many things, it's very difficult for his fans to really, pay attention to you, right? Your small project trying to get started. On the other end, you have a very long tail of very, very small influencers, right? So how do you know who they are, right? How do you tell whether or not they're legit, right? And in fact, we think that the long tail of small influencers tend to be a lot more effective at actually driving through and instilling a specific message into their audience. But they're very hard to find, right? And then also, I mean, if you're in Telegram, if you're in whatever, you get pitches all the time. People are pitching you, hey, I have a marketing proposal, X, Y, whatever, right? How do you tell how real they are, right? What is this group? What are they doing? Are these people actually talking about the topics you're talking about? So there's really no track record, right? I mean, there's nothing tracking things, right? So actual implementation wise, this is very preliminary. We haven't even actually gotten this deployed yet, but we actually are deploying listeners, right? And once again, it's not spying, it's all listening to publicly available information, right? Not like there's no way we can listen to private conversations, right? We deploy listeners across a lot of the largest sort of what we call communication tools, right? Like Telegram, like Twitter, like WhatsApp, and they listen in public groups, right? Just to see what people are saying, right? And once again, publicly available information, right? And then we can actually track, like, if someone says, I can promote something for you, right? Okay, did they actually do it? What did they say, right? Did they talk about your project, or did they say nothing about it, or were they being very negative about your project, right? What are other people saying about it, right? So over time, what you can actually do is that, and obviously you don't store all the raw data on a chain, right? That's excessive. What you can actually do is that you can actually start distilling analytics, right? Very, very sort of pared down, highly compressed analytics. And you can say, we can actually start tracking either individual influencers or actually communities of enthusiasts, and actually track their characteristics over time, so that people can actually have a really good idea about what they're getting into, right? So, and then that's quantifiable, right? So, so later on, if someone comes in and they say, well, who should I work with? Well, you have a list of people or a list of groups that you can actually look at. And then even later on, if someone wants to say, I want to issue an asset, like me, Steven, I want to issue Steven coin, for example, then people are going to say, well, great, who are you? Who's Steven? What has he done before? Well, here are all the things he's done before, right? And here's the impact that he's had, quantified, right? Trackable, verifiable. And that's sort of like the basic model that we were thinking in terms of creating verifiable and quantifiable reputation and influence, right? And I think that really goes hand in hand with what Near is doing, right? I mean, I think you guys are more focused on like the other half of the other side of the coin, really, which is infrastructure to enable influencer to interact with fans and assets and all this kind of thing. So we just want to be able to provide the signal to actually make sure that operationally, people know who to work with, and long term, if there are any kind of financial assets involved, we're able to provide a signal that could assist in the valuation or the selection process, right?
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And I'm sorry, I almost interrupted you, but I did want to say that I do believe that the tapping the long tail of smaller influencers actually, if there is a way to do that in sort of I'm a developer, so I'm going to say like some sort of a multiplexy kind of way, like, like if there's a way to tap that in like a general way, and appeal to all of those people and maybe even incentivize them, then what you would get is you'd get much more organic impact out of that. Because if you look at like a small influencer's conversations online, they tend to have more what they call engagement. So that's like deeper below the surface metrics than, for example, a huge influencer that basically, you know, sure, they tweet out an image, but it's like highly manufactured or something.
Yeah.
And then everyone just likes the image, but they don't actually engage with that gigantic.
Yeah, they don't act on it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's you know, working the long tail is a way to actually increase, I guess, like interactive engagement with a brand, or like kind of foster more kind of organic and authentic kind of conversations around something, versus just a broadcast personality. Like, you know, like I'm sure Taylor Swift has like lots of conversations going on her Instagram or something, but I mean, she's largely a broadcast medium, like
Exactly.
when she goes on to platforms, as opposed to a super fan of Taylor Swift that is on, you know, on those platforms all day long, talking back and forth with people, right? So I think that being able to tap that behavior, being able to kind of track it, audit it, maybe surface it for a personality like Taylor Swift could be really important.
Yeah, I mean, another way I would look at it is for someone like Taylor Swift, just to keep going with your example, you know, there's already a consensus on her value or on her influence, right? Whereas like this is a good use for blockchain, because if you're trying to like elevate or bring to people's attention, you know, the long tail, as you put it, of influencers, right? You're using blockchain to generate that consensus on their value, right? To extract that value as a application function for people to see and witness.
Yeah, I mean, this definitely goes, I mean, just really to sort of build on what you were saying, Matt. I think, yeah, and also what Justin's saying, you know, this long tail, right? These influencers, you know, they're probably making like the bulk of the impact, but you know, they're not getting acknowledged, right, for their efforts, really, right? Because people don't know who they are, right? And a lot of times they're not really out to make money either, right? I mean, that's why, like Matt, you said, you know, they generate so much actual engagement. They're not out to make money. They're not a brand. They're just people who are really enthusiastic about something, and they're talking about it with their friends, with their peers. And yeah, it's a smaller group of people, but they're a lot more engaged. So if one of these people, these smaller, like I said, influencer wants to actually, you know, sort of say, hey, I want to scale up and broadcast my message to a larger sort of audience, you know, they often lack they really lack, you know, venues, right, to really say fundraise or to get access to resources, or really to get, you know, get his message to a broader audience, because, you know, people are like, who are you, right? Like, prove to me that you actually do things, or whatever, right? So it's like, you know, I believe that most sort of influencers sort of just like stuck in this long tail, like, you know, never land, where they're sort of just there, and it's very hard to get out of it. And once you become huge, ironically, like Matt, you said, they sort of become like a like a loudspeaker, right? They're not really like an influencer anymore, because they're not that engaged with people.
Right. I just noticed the Q&A notification. There's a couple of questions there. I'm not sure if we want to field those now or later.
We can field them later, after we can do them now if you want. So yeah, you want to answer the first one? The first one is, how do you incentivize an app developer to switch to a new chain? Gotta be something better than swag.
Why not? I got the swag. Actually, I've got something really good, but these aren't near swag. This is something I ordered custom. I got these.
Oh, nice.
These are the real deal. This isn't AR. You can see the light reflecting. It's real. Yeah. there's us.
Yeah, I can see me in it. Nice.
I also have an ETH Denver spork it's a limited edition special.
Wow.
Anyway, just so many weird crypto things, isn't there? But yeah, how would I incentivize an ETH developer? And maybe you guys can answer it from Taraxa's point of view. I mean, you wouldn't incentivize an ETH developer to switch. You'd incentivize an ETH developer to maybe use Taraxa combined with their existing sort of ETH offerings. And then there is like a follow-up question, like, what's ownership in the creator economy?
Yeah.
That's like that's almost like a what is life question. But yeah, incentivizing developers to switch to a new chain. Yeah, I think it's a worthy question. It's obviously like it's an uphill battle for other you know, L1s and stuff to say, you know, bring your communities here, or bridge your assets, you know, bridge your liquidity, whatever you want to call it. I think for developers specifically, we have a couple of interesting projects on Near. One is called Aurora, which is basically the EVM on Near. So you can deploy to Aurora just as you would to like an XDAI chain or a Polygon or whatever. And then all your users have to do is like switch their network in MetaMask. So that's Aurora network. There's a Twitter handle for that called @AuroraIsNear. And yeah, that's a really great way to basically scale your apps and stuff like that. And then the question is, well, I already have an existing ETH app, you know, some ERC20 or some tokens, you know, deployed over on ETH. How do I get them over? Well, we also have the Rainbow Bridge, and you can bridge directly into Aurora network on Near. So a lot of that stuff I feel like is being answered, and you know, Near's got a lot of like technical people and a lot of people that kind of just ship stuff and don't really talk about it. But a lot of this stuff is really, you know, it's working out in the wild today. People are bridging assets. They're bridging ERC20s into Near and into Aurora. They're doing all sorts of great stuff. I mean, I would just encourage ETH developers to try it out. It's super simple. And in terms of like, kind of, if you're starting a new project, I think that basically, I don't want to make any predictions, and I don't want to ostracize myself from the ETH community, because I love the ETH community. But I guess the question would be like, you know, how long are we going to wait for scalability, things like that? You know, if you're doing a small new project with a creator or something, you know, maybe you do want to try a new chain, because it's going to be a little bit quicker to sort of get to that scalability and create the kind of experiences that you want with the creator.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think one thing is I sort of reject the premise of the question, in the sense that I don't think it's entirely about, or even primarily about, getting to a switch from Ethereum to you know, a new chain. You know, I view blockchain as being still very, very early days, and it'd be sort of like worrying about how you get people to switch from using Netscape to using an Android device, right? Like, the technology is evolving and the application space is growing, and there's just going to be new applications and new technology, and that's coming along, and it's going to be deploying on these new chains. I also think, you know, we're in the giant community that's interested in decentralizing things, and it doesn't really hold up, the idea that we would have all blockchain related activity occur on one chain, right? So by definition, that is a form of centralization. So I think what you're going to see is that individual chains nucleate individual communities and individual application spaces. And just like you said about bridges, it's not really going to be a matter of having to switch, right? It's going to be a matter of interoperability, right? So if you're doing DeFi on the Ethereum chain and you want to interoperate that with an application that's tied to ownership or gig economy or informal transactions, right, then you're going to be using the bridges that everyone's building between these different chains and platforms, right? And ultimately, we really strongly believe, you know, this is going to be sort of hidden from a user, right? Like a user is not necessarily going to need to intimately know what blockchain is enabling, their better life, right? Like the application is taking care of that. Like the developers are worried about that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I want to build off of a little bit, which is that I think at Taraxa, I mean, we're very focused on building a new use case, right, for blockchain, right? And this is the idea of, being able to track, verify, and then eventually quantify informal transactions, transactional agreements and data, right? So doesn't really seem like anyone else is doing it. And it does take a lot of time to actually build up that use case and that ecosystem. I think like what Justin said, I think what makes a sort of a layer one ecosystem powerful often it's not really sort of, hey, let's compare our tech specs and one by one or whatever, but it's really sort of, can you build a community around it, nucleating around sort of a use case, right? I think Ethereum, probably by accident, because they were like, I guess the first one with a with a program with a Turing complete programming language, sort of became like the ecosystem for finance almost, right? Like that I wouldn't say that's extremely well defined, but it just seems like there's like all the finance traffic is on Ethereum. And that's why I think, bridges is also very important. Like we're not looking to say like we want to be like, we want to take all DeFi traffic from Ethereum and put it on Taraxa. Like that's not realistic because there's so much networking effect that's happening on Ethereum already. And like what Matt said, I think we're focused on building our own use case, plus we're going to bridge with Ethereum, right? So with the use cases that we have, with the signals that we're generating, I think it could be very beneficial to a lot of the financial DeFi and financial ecosystems that reside on Ethereum to help them to create new assets, right? Assets that are based on real world signals and maybe financial instruments that are not fully and only collateralized, right? Based on collateralized finance. So, so yeah, I mean, it's, this, we're focused, I think we're focused on building our own unique ecosystem with a unique use case and bridging with other ecosystems that have, very unique and well-defined use cases and ecosystems. So cool. This question almost seems like it's planted because it actually transitions really well into our second topic, which is how would you we're both layer one networks. I mean, how would you really build like a successful layer one ecosystem, right? Like how do you drive adoption? What are you doing? What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, going back to my work as sort of more traditional developer relations inside Near, I've always been a big fan as a developer of basically using examples. So seeing example apps, being able to grab them, clone them, change a few lines of code, and see see what they do, and kind of like actually get my hands dirty and sort of see how they work. Like, I guess, we're trying to appeal to developers to build apps on our layer one, and then we're trying to get those developers to obviously be successful out in the market. So there's a certain aspect of sort of go to market and stuff like that that's a little bit beyond me, probably beyond us. And product market fit and viability, feasibility, blah, blah, blah. But that's beyond us. But let's talk about just getting developers to start building. Well, any developer is sort of they're like a machinist, and somebody who's a machinist or works on tools, when they go to buy a watch, they don't just go to the watch store and stare through the glass. They don't just buy the watch at face value. They usually go over to the back where the guy in the watch store is fixing the watches and taking apart the watches and putting them back together, and said, how does that work? And what makes this watch different from the next watch? And that's a really great kind of that's a really great tool to have in your sort of your developer relations kind of arsenal, is to have a lot of watches with a lot of different examples and features and things like that. So I've tried to make a ton of sample apps, and I don't just mean making like a really sexy generator that you can hit the CLI and you know and out pops a perfect kind of boilerplate. I mean actual like apps that do specific things. And then I basically say to a bunch of people, you know, on like, or a bunch of the developers in the ecosystem, I say, clone these, you know, clone these, steal these, take the code, do whatever you want with it, break it, take pieces of it and just lock stock, copy paste them into your apps. And the reason I do this is because I think it's sort of it's the fastest way to do stuff with limited resources. So, everyone's got time, and for me, building sample apps and then, making maybe a couple of YouTube videos. I'll talk about the video strategy in just a sec, but making sample apps and then recording some video walkthroughs is the fastest way that I can produce kind of the I don't have another word for this, but it's kind of funny. It's the fastest way I can produce the thickest content. So a sample app is really, really dense. There's tons of code in there. And then, producing a video is also really dense, like a 30 minute to 1 hour video. And then it's about getting a team around you that can pull apart those videos, that can pull apart those examples and take snippets out of them and say, oh, Matt did something really interesting here that's a little different than what we have in the docs. Maybe we'll add an extra section about sort of like, useful snippets, and we'll just put that in there, and we'll say, sometimes you're going to be doing, X, and here's a way to do it. Here's an example Y to sort of solve for that X. So having a team around you that can kind of pull out those examples and pick them apart, and the same goes for video. Taking a long, dense video and taking out the interesting bits and then pulling that into smaller, more digestible content that's like more topic specific would help basically developers when they get stuck on particular topics. But I do think that solving for that end-to-end example is the #1 way to get new developers interested in your ecosystem. I think like the only criticism of my work, or what I've kind of produced in the near sort of developer relations journey, could be said that my videos are a little long, and I could stand to produce a little bit more kind of 5-minute kind of hypey videos, but I do produce those videos when I go on to, for example, like a conference, because I have like 15 minutes to show something, and so usually I pair up a bunch of slides with like a 5-minute demo of me cloning an existing repository, making some very, very minor modifications, and then running the application and saying to developers, it's just that easy. It takes about 4 to 5 minutes. And so that works out. But if you watch the video of me building that sample application, it's probably, you might fall asleep, or you might want to turn up the speed. So it's just me basically in front of the computer, kind of bumbling away, trying to kind of code something unique. But yeah, I would say that working out in the open has been really effective as well. So everything that I produced, we actually have a GitHub repo. It's called near-apps. So it's near with a hyphen and then apps. So you go to github.com/near-apps. It's like a separate organization that I started when I joined the developer relations team. And this is really just clonable apps, and they should all run. You just, yarn and yarn start, and you should be faced with something that is running. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So yeah, I started that a while ago, back in, I guess, the beginning of February. And we've got a bunch of sample apps there. Maybe there's like a dozen or so. And I produced a ton of videos based on those apps. We call them live app review. So we do it every week on Thursdays, Thursday today, but I can't do it because I'm in another meeting. But we try to do it every Thursdays, and we do it as a team, as a group, out in the open. We just record it live, and then we just put it up on YouTube. When we can't do it on a Thursday, I try to hit that weekly momentum. And then earlier on, before we had a bunch of videos, I sort of seeded live app review with, like, I think I did from February 1st to February 12th, I think I did like 10 videos or something. So, and each one is like maybe 45 minutes to an hour or more. It was just covering topics and just live coding. So yeah, I think all of that is really helpful to build a developer ecosystem, developer community. And I actually told somebody this the other day, and I'm pretty adamant about this, is screen sharing is fine, even for explainer videos, I guess, like when somebody's kind of clicking around in an explainer video. Screen sharing is fine, but you got to have a human face. Like, you have to have a person there. So I usually do my videos like as a little person in the corner, and then I have my code up here. And I think it's important because if another developer is watching, it's important to kind of have a connection there with a person that is, like, I make mistakes while I'm coding, and I think it's just important to see a face, to see somebody else who's kind of confused. Like, I kind of wrinkle up my forehead and I get stuck and stuff. So I think it's kind of, gives it that human element, and it's pretty important. Anyway, sorry for the big spiel, but that's kind of how I feel about I guess developer ecosystem building.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really helpful. I think at Taraxa, where, like I said, we really see sort of our application use case as tightly integrated with our layer one. So I think we're actually taking it. I wouldn't say one step further, just that we actually want to drive it to the next step, which is we actually want to drive an application into product market fit, right? We actually want to take one application and just say, we're going to focus our energy on this one thing, and we're going to drive it to product market fit. We're going to say, hey, look, this app has traction, right? How many people are using it? They're using it everywhere. And then I think in many ways, right? Like, we're all trying to sort of like get eyeballs from developers, right? Why should a developer pay attention, right? So I think we're just taking maybe slightly different approaches. So a developer could pay a lot of attention with Nir's approach, right? Makes everything easy for me. I know exactly how to do it. I think what we want to do is that the thing that we want to use to grab developers' attention is really sort of, hey, this app is taking off, right? And but you can do something similar to this, and then here are the things that you can do to build this functionality into your application as well. So we thought that could probably get a little bit more attention at the end of the day. But also, I think we ourselves in the team, we just really want to build like an application that has traction, to just prove that, hey, this use case that we're very focused on can be deployed into a real world scenario and have it be useful, right? So that's sort of our focus. We're more focused on right now, at least, we're more focused on the product market fit portion of the applications that we're building. Yeah, it is a long journey. I mean, both are long journeys, right? So okay, cool. What are your thoughts around sort of Matt, what are your thoughts around sort of building like a general purpose versus like sort of like a very niche ecosystem, right? So like as a layer one, do you want to be like sort of anything can run on us, and we welcome anything run us, and we support anything that runs on us? or there's another school of thought which is sort of like, well, we're only going to be focused on one specific set of use cases or one specific set of technologies? Like, what are your thoughts on that, and what's sort of Near's overall approach on that?
That's a great question. I think that Near as an org, I can't speak to kind of where they're going or what they're doing, but because I'm not like a co-founder or in charge over there. And as I sort of exit with my team into Satori, we're going to be focused basically on just creators, communities, and that means, you know, NFTs, DAOs, social tokens for the crypto people, and then, you know, creators and communities means just basically for non-crypto people, it just means digital merchandise and fun, like, you know, online, you know, games and contests and things like that. But, you know, Web3 kind of ownership layer, and then sort of Web2 kind of magic on top, a bunch of extra sort of app and product stuff. But yeah, I do think that Near is still very general purpose. It appeals to you know, it appeals to builders who just want to kind of build anything. There is some specific stuff that has happened on Near that I guess it just has happened organically. And much like my group formed around sort of creators and communities, and to serve as creators and communities and to build those example applications, we decided that the best strategy was to go out and to just build the product, because we had too many people asking us, hey, that all sounds well and good, but can you just build it for me?
Show me, right?
Yeah, basically, like, so that's fine for that. And then there's other groups. So for example, there's a core group inside Near that is also spinning out as well, to use that sort of spin out kind of metaphor. They're called Proximity Labs, and they're spinning out to do DeFi. Now they're going to do a little bit of their own DeFi, but they're also going to be sort of a support network, liquidity kind of support, things like that, bridging and stuff for all of the DeFi projects on Near. And they're very interested in DeFi, and that's their thing. And then there's another group that I mentioned before, the sort of EVM, you know, bridging Solidity projects group, and that is the group behind Aurora. So the Aurora project, where basically you can just deploy Solidity contracts on Near. So each one of these groups has like a different approach to how they build their ecosystem. And I think that it's great that we're seeing this happen now. Near at its core will probably do a little less ecosystem and more just support, not like, I guess, a little less growth stuff and more support, and they'll let these orgs kind of take the go-to-market approach, take the growth approach, if that makes sense. How are you looking at this with Taraxa, Stephen? Like, are you going out and leading by example, or are you trying to find like kind of other companies and JV kind of stuff to build on top of Taraxa, or are you doing it more of a decentralized approach? I'm curious.
Yeah, so I think we are, you know, very focused on this this idea of informal transactions, right? So what we've been constantly trying to do is basically build a product all the way to its end, and then start driving market adoption for it. And I think in the past we've had lots of iterations, right? We built actually a hardware integrated solution for an automotive OEM we've been working with, as well as an asset leasing company we've been working with. But the hardware part of it is great, but it's trial and error, right? But it goes very slowly, right? Anytime you need to install hardware, deploy hardware, it doesn't happen as quickly as it does in the digital world. And we,
by the way, I just want to say I hate hardware. I've done interactive art installations before, like lighting controllers and like stuff like with the Microsoft Connect. Just hate it, because it's just like, it's so error prone, and it's so slow, right? Like software is fine, like you just, you know, type a bunch of code and like, you know, hit run, and it just, you get instant feedback. But yeah.
Oh man, you're gonna really hate the stuff we were doing before. We actually custom design and manufacture our own circuit board with it's actually a hardened piece of hardware that has secure element and then a write once MCU on it. Anyway, the board designing and manufacturing process itself took like 8 months. So go figure, right? So it was very slow. And then of course the customer has some ideas. Let's change this. Well, unlike software, you can't just change a few lines of code. You gotta go back, change the blueprint, queue up at the manufacturer, and it's like another few months gone, right? So it's pretty intense. So kudos to all the respect, right, to all the awesome hardware that we use every single day, right? Like this is not easy. It's not easy to get done. Yeah. So the second iteration that we did was really to create a software-only solution, and we're targeting construction firms as well as supply chain supply chain players, right? I think the overall sort of challenge we ran into with those, as well as the hardware use cases, hardware-enabled use cases, was that it was very difficult for people in the crypto ecosystem to really understand what we're doing, right? Because these are very niche sort of pain points that happen in specific industry verticals. And unless you sort of dig deep into these industry verticals, people just don't get it. Like, why are you doing this, right? So that's why I think for our sort of third iteration, we're not obviously abandoning any of our previous customers, right? But for our third iteration, we actually want to create something that was a lot closer to the crypto ecosystem. That's a lot more crypto native, so that our communities actually have a chance to not only understand, but also participate, right, and use these applications. A lot of these other applications that we created, like, especially the hardware one, like what's, an average community member will have absolutely no use with the circuit board, right? Like, what they use it for. So yeah, so I think for us, we're really, we're really focused on this informal transactions use case, and I guess we're just going to drive it through and drive it into product market fit, and use that to say, hey, this is the use case that we want to focus on. This is the type of ecosystem and that we want to grow on our layer one. Now, that being said, we do have a lot of friends, who are sort of like, and I actually see this question that are coming in. What does Taraxa think about NFTs? We have friends, and I call them friends. I don't call them partners. I think the word partner has been overused, but we have friends who run other projects, right? Like, for example, we have a very, very close friend who's another Stanford classmate of mine, same year as Justin and myself. He's running a development firm, actually based out of Tokyo. And I think earlier this year, he was telling me that he signed up, I think, 8 girl bands. So these are just like pop bands, right? Like girls, right? Like and they've been having a very hard time, I think, during the pandemic, sort of monetizing on their asset and really earning income stream, because apparently most of their income stream, or almost all of it, is really based on offline concerts and offline activities, right? So as those sort of dry up, they sort of lose the ability to earn money. And so he's been helping them to sort of digitize a lot of their content, digitize the way that they interact with fans. And of course, he's like, hey, Steven, you guys are blockchain people, right? We're like, yeah. Like, can I build something to do with NFTs? Because, my clients are asking about it, right? So I'm like, sure, why not? If you want to build on top of it, that's great. So while our project's focus is not really saying, it's our primary objective to have NFTs on our platform, we do go out and seek out, other projects and say, if you actually want to build on top of it, we welcome it. But our primary objective is still sort of driving our informal transaction use cases to product market fit.
Yeah, I think the goal here from all these different approaches really is to nucleate, or to put a seed into the system that will cause other projects to see the idea and build around that idea and off of that idea and adjacent to that idea, as opposed to just sort of building an empty layer one and then just assuming or hoping you get random things. I think what really makes a layer one successful is that it has interoperability. Right? There's reasons for these applications to be on this common platform, and to some extent you can define the common use case and common goal of the applications, right? Like otherwise, they might as well be on their own chain. I mean, one of the things I used to wonder about when I was conceptualizing Taraxa and what we were going to do and how we were going to change the world is, why can't each application just have its own blockchain, right? Like why would you want to have multiple applications on a chain? And of course, the reason is for interoperability and to some extent economy of scale. But I think we're going to see a world in which not only do you have a bunch of applications within a space on a chain, and maybe a space or two on a chain, but obviously you're going to have the ability to interoperate between the chains, because almost any kind of application as a service definitely interacts with other types of services, right?
I know we're at time, but I got to ask the question: what do we think the killer application is going to be?
Like for blockchain in general?
Yeah, just for like anything that is sort of, anything that is cryptographically owned.
Yeah, so
let's call it that.
I'll go back and so to me, the fun thing about being in blockchain right now is it's kind of like working on the internet in the 70s and the 80s, right? Yeah. Actually, my father, just to really go as an aside, but just to give some historical perspective, my father very successfully managed to avoid working at two companies that would have really changed his life trajectory. One was when he was fresh out of grad school, he went to interview at Bell Labs, and he was in this. They took him to this gymnasium, and they had these giant racks of electronics on carts, and they were pushing him around the room. And he's like, "What is this?" And they're talking about cellular technology. He's like, "Well, this looks clunky." So those carts, were basically the early version of what would be in an analog phone, or was in a car phone and whatnot. And they were trying to develop techniques for moving radio transmitters from one cell to another cell on the fly and things like that. And so you look at the early technology and you think, wow, this isn't going to change the world. And then another place he interviewed later in life was at Microsoft, back when they were in Albuquerque. Early days, but he didn't want to go live in Albuquerque, right? So, you look at these technologies in the early days, and it's so far removed from what it'll eventually become, right? And which isn't to say you can't think about what it'll eventually become. I mean, people early on, when you had computers and radios, you can see people that realized, okay, eventually you're going to have a computer in your hand that has a radio, and it can talk to other computers. There's no need for you to be sitting in front of a terminal doing a timeshare. But just because you could envision that doesn't mean it was ready yet, right? So I think it's blockchain is kind of paradoxical in that it's easy to envision sort of the end goal and end state of, we're getting rid of all the middlemen, everything's distributed. We solve all these trust gaps. You have Uber without the Uber company. You have Airbnb without Airbnb as a company, all these kind of middleman slayers, get rid of Facebook, blah, 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 right? But to get there is tough. For me, one of the things I'm most excited about in the long run, and perhaps it is because I come out of hardware, is I really think blockchain has just unlimited potential for machine-to-machine economies and sort of machine-to-machine operability. IoT as a concept right now is in its early days. We're basically in the industry world, we just call anything IoT if it has a radio in it and it's not, a high-end electronic item. If it's high-end, it's a cell phone or Wi-Fi. If it's a washing machine with a radio in it, even if it's a Wi-Fi radio, suddenly it's IoT. But eventually you're going to have truly just an unbelievable number of connected devices. I mean, thousands of more devices, 10,000 more devices than people on Earth, right? And so solving how they interoperate, how they deploy and tear down their networks and all that, I think blockchain is going to be an excellent solution because it solves all the friction of coordination and trust gaps between all these different devices. But so I mean, it's easy to talk about long-term killer applications. I think the real challenge is finding the immediate applications that help you change the world. I think there's studies that say, like, if you ask people in business, 90% of them say that blockchain is going to change the way they do business, but 100% of them say they have no idea how it's going to change the way they do business. And I think that's because it's not, compared to like a personal computer, it's not a technology replacement, right? It's really it's an additional technology and an additional tool that it gives people an opportunity to create new things. So I think we're trying to take an incremental approach and to provide tools and platforms that allow people to do things that right now would be sort of impossible to do. And because they're impossible to do, they don't necessarily immediately realize that they can do them, right? So we have all these informal transactions out there in the world. And right now, capturing them is so tedious that people just abandon doing it, or they don't think about doing it. And to some extent that prohibits people from having interactions that they could otherwise have. And it definitely prevents them from fully capturing, all the benefit of recording. So that I think that's what we've settled on as our intermediate focus. Maybe Stephen, you have a more succinct answer than I do.
I don't really have a super succinct answer, but I mean, I'll probably go back to, I'll try to shorten this as much as I can, but I just feel like in my career, I really made some, like, I guess, lots of discoveries, but there was one insight that really struck me, which is that I had founded a few startups, and then later on, I've gone to work with Monter Deloitte as a partner in their strategy consulting practice, basically advising huge companies on how they can be more like startups, right? So back in the, I guess, the mid 2010s or whatever, if you talk to any Fortune 100, Fortune 500 executive, they're all very worried that they're going to get disrupted. Probably still today, right? I just talked to less of them. They're all going to get mysteriously one day wake up and their entire market got killed by like a small startup they never heard of. Everyone's super afraid of that. So they're like, well, how can we innovate? Like, startups, how can we prevent this from happening? Or how can we make decisions faster? How can we come up with more innovative solutions? And after working with them for a few years, lots of different companies, we've done some interesting work. What I started realizing was this very paradoxical thing is that the larger an organization gets, the larger a project gets, actually the less information they have access to, right? It sounds so weird, right? A large organization, of course, they have more data, but they have a lot less trustworthy data, right? That's really what gets us to the informal transactions. That why does a small organization have move so quickly, make decisions so quickly? Because most people, if all the people in that organization, in that project, they're on the front lines, right? They're sort of next to the market, seeing where things are happening. And the vast majority of the time, things are happening through informal transactions, right? It's not like people have contracts. I don't sit down and sign 30 contracts every day. I just I talk to Justin and I'm like, hey, we're going to do this, let's do it, right? And we're going to do it. Right? So a lot of these sort of communications and coordinations, they're informal, sales deals, and all kinds of collaboration is happening through informal transactions, informal agreements. And that's over 80% of the communication that we actually make. If you're not there to witness it, you don't know it, period, right? You don't trust it, you don't know, right? Very, very tiny amount of that information actually makes it into the corporate decision-making process or organizational decision-making process in the form of, everyone's favorite ERP software, right? As you know, everyone loves to type information into their company's ERP system, right? It's ridiculous, right? So if you get into a large organization, a large infrastructure, and a large sort of project where there are lots of stakeholders, then it's very difficult for these informal transactional agreements and data to really filter up, because as soon as they hit the second and third layer, that trust gap just cuts them down, right? People are like, well, I don't trust this, right? Like, where did you get this information? Like, prove it. Prove that this is real. And of course, they can't provide proof because this stuff is not verified. Like a sales guy talked to another sales guy. He overheard something in a cafe, and and they were ironing out a deal. And just like, well, I talked to this guy. He said it was great. Where's the proof? I mean, I just talked to him, right? No proof. Sorry, dude. This doesn't exist, right? Corporate ERP systems are filled with garbage data like this, right? Where there's like, the executives constantly are telling us, right, I don't trust any of the data that's in our ERP system because they're not verifiable, right? There's no way to verify them. So they have all this data, massive amounts of data, and the vast majority of it is thrown away because they can't trust it or verify, right? So that's why that to me, that's the fundamental reason why large organizations and large sort of companies or projects with lots of stakeholders, they don't move very quickly, they don't make decisions, and they can't innovate because they're losing a lot of data, right? And that's not great. I mean, that's not great for humans in general, right? So when I think when Justin and I started this project, we were just like, well, there are two ways to solve this problem. One way is to be able to track these informal transactions and make it a lot easier for people to verify them. The other way is screw humans. We're the past. Let's go with machines, right? Let's enable machines to do a lot of things much more automatically and much better, right? So it's really this problem of human organizational scaling, right? I think that's something that blockchain can really solve, right? I think
I would
that
just
would be very, very
interject that they're not exclusive by any means. I mean, machines and sensors and whatnot capture a lot of informal transactions, capture a lot of data, and people generate just as many informal transactions as well, right? So they're not exclusive. It's just the technology side. The hardware side, for all the reasons you guys mentioned as hardware haters, it's going to be slower. But I very much think it's going to be useful down the road, right?
What do you think, Matt? Sorry, we gave very long-winded answers to your simple question.
That's great. It's a great question. I'm looking for a killer app. So I'm looking for like email, something like that. There's a ton of cars in the world, but nobody, like only like 0.001% of the people that are in those cars even kind of know what an engine is. Most people just get in the car, stick their key in and go, because the car gets them from A to B. The car, they don't need to know how, gasoline and pistons fire and things like that. They don't need to know anything. So likewise, in digital, people don't use TCP/IP. They use email. They use a lot of sort of kind of like packaged things. So I guess I'm like trying to figure out what are the packaged things that sit on top of, cryptographically secured ownership online, which is basically what the business we're all in, right? What are the packaged things that sit on top of that ownership, digital ownership, that will be, the email, or be something that kind of like comes out into the world that just doesn't go away. Because a lot of things have come out of crypto, but they haven't gone away, but they've sort of, they've either gone into speculation, so like buy and hold, which is, like it's Bitcoin, whatever, and there's no problem with that. I'm just not interested in it. Or they have gone into obscurity. So even something as popular as like a CryptoKitties, I mean, it was hot and then it was not, and while there are still CryptoKitties out there that would like fetch a price, they're just, nobody's trading them anymore. Nobody cares, right? So no offense, but It's just like, you know, the market, the market has no emotions. So basically, I guess I'm looking for kind of for use cases, for things that can be put out into the world that are not just the speculative kind of use cases, but they can be put out into the world, and then actually they have staying power. So they become like the next radio, the next podcasting, the next television, you know, like the next sort of genre of a movie or something. So on top of this Web3 or crypto ownership, I want to figure out what are those things. And I realize that like that's not an answer. That's just it's a framework for what the answer should be. But I think we're close to seeing some of those use cases. But yeah, still not sure what the actual specific concrete breakout hit would be. I mean, I just know that the abstract general framework is there. That all of the ingredients are actually there, in my opinion. You know, scalable chains, scalable layer ones, all sorts of things. You know, whether you're specializing in informal transactions like Taraxa or a general purpose blockchain like Near, it's all there. All the ingredients are there. Now the question is, how do we go to market and productize it so that we can actually hit something with people that sticks and becomes, I guess, part of the fabric of culture and society. So that's a huge question, right? So
Yeah.
how do we do that? I don't really know. I mean, we just have to keep iterating and experimenting. But the ingredients are there. The framework for kind of what that looks like is there. I think we're starting to get very close. We're starting to kind of break in to the mainstream a little bit more. I think NFTs getting hot and going through a big a Beeple hype cycle.
Yeah.
was good. It was a good thing. But now we've sort of crashed out, and everyone has their heads down and building. I can feel it. I know you guys can feel it as well. And we're gonna see something that kind of comes out of that looks a lot more mainstream. You know, just because somebody sells an NFT for $69 million or whatever, that to me, that personally, that draws a lot of eyeballs to the space. Me personally, that means absolutely nothing. I think it's just not relevant. It's inconsequential. Like a soccer mom out in a suburb of Vancouver, you know, when I see her using crypto on her phone and collecting, you know, like collecting things from her favorite, you know, musicians and artists while she's, you know, has grocery bags in one hand and a couple of kids, you know, attached to her back on the other. When I see that mom walking towards her van and she's still collecting stuff, that's when I'll know we've broken through. You know, like somebody said to me the other day, the mom and the older sister test or something like that. But speaking of which, we do need to also get more female founders into the space so that they can create these experiences.
Exactly.
Anyway, so yeah, just some rambling as well, a bit of a long-winded answer, but I think that the ingredients are there. The framework for what success looks like in terms of a mainstream use case is there. I think it's just a matter of iterating with the public, with the market, figuring out what that looks like, and then just being able and willing to just pour gasoline on it when you see the little flames of success, you know.
Your choice of automobile is an interesting example because you know, it's also sort of a network and has network effects, right? I mean, the early automobile, you're trying to replace the very well-known and mature concept of horses and horse and buggies, and you had all these great dirt roads for horses, but early automobiles barely went faster than a horse. And oh, by the way, like, you know, be asking someone to buy an automobile and then, oh, you have to make your own gasoline, you know, like from crude oil because there's no gas stations. So I think I agree with you that we've really have made a lot of progress within blockchain world of getting tools in place for people to start making applications. But even though just like with the automobile, it's easy to envision someday you're going to have an automobile that's way better than the horse and buggy and everyone's going to own it. Like it really is tough to, the challenge for us is to figure out how to put all the ingredients together to make tools and make infrastructure that allow it to get adoption. And the first adoptions and the first waves of adoptions won't be the broad adoption that we seek for, you know, everyone using blockchain, everyone using our applications. And it's going to take some failures and some fads and some crypto kitties and some NFTs to generate the interest in an ever growing, you know, size of community to get to that end game of full adoption. Because in some ways, you know, we could just build the end vision application today, but it wouldn't work very well and it wouldn't have any traction, right? So
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Matt, today for your insightful conversation and discussions. And
yeah, man,
yeah, yeah. Thanks, Justin. And yeah, we'll end our AMA here. And I guess I'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Okay. Thanks, everyone.